no one paid attention to her, not until the judge paused, adjusted his glasses, and looked again. His expression changed instantly, because he knew exactly who she was and what that meant for the case. I sat in the cold, hard chair of the courtroom, a ghost in my own life. To my right, my husband David's lawyer, a sleek shark in a suit, spoke with a voice that dripped condescension. He painted me as a dependent, a social climbing hobbyist, a contributor of nothing, entitled to nothing. David wouldn't even look at me. After 15 years, this was our finale. Me, the quiet, fatting wife, and him, the tech wunderkind, eager to trade me in for a newer model. The spectators' bored glances slid right over me. Even the court clerk typed with disinterest. I was a nobody, a footnote. I kept my eyes on my hands, folded in my lap. Let them talk. Let them lay out their version of our story, a tale of broken vows where my only sin was growing older. The judge, an older man with a weary face, listened, flipping pages. Then his gaze settled on the petitioner's information sheet before him. He paused. He adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. His eyes snapped to mine, a flicker of shock, then profound recognition. The room's energy shifted. The lawyer's words faltered. Because the judge knew. And in that silent, electric moment, everything was about to change. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and comment where you are watching from. The vinyl seat of the courtroom chair was cold, a persistent, leaching chill that seeped through the thin wool of my skirt. I focused on that sensation, a grounding point in the swirling unreality of the moment. Around me, the room hummed with a low, dismissive energy. The air smelled of lemon-scented polish, stale coffee, and ambition, the sharp, metallic kind. To my right, David's lawyer, Mr. Bradstone, was a study in controlled power, his silver-templed hair and Savile Row suit a uniform of victory. His voice, a polished baritone, was currently painting a portrait of my life. It was a masterpiece of minimalist fiction. 15 years, Your Honor, Bradstone intoned, packing slowly before the bench like a lecturer before a dim class. 15 years where my client, David Vance, built an empire from a garage startup into Etha Tech, a leader in next-generation cybersecurity. He provided, he innovated, he carried the weight of creation and success. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over me, a glance so brief it was less than an afterthought. And during this period of exponential growth, the petitioner, Ms. Alara Vance, was present. The word hung in the air, empty and devastating. Present, like a piece of furniture, a potted plant. I kept my eyes on my hands, folded in my lap. My wedding band, a simple platinum band I'd chosen for its understated elegance, felt suddenly like a shackle. I resisted the urge to twist it. She engaged in social planning, Bradstone continued, consulting a pad as if reading a disappointing grocery list. Interior decoration of their various homes, hobbies. He said hobbies as if it were a mild social disease. She was the beneficiary of a lifestyle wholly funded by my client's tireless efforts. A comfortable, supported lifestyle, which, pursuant to the binding prenuptial agreement signed by both parties at the outset of this marriage, is amply accounted for in the settlement we have proposed. From the corner of my eye, I saw David. He sat perfectly still at his counsel's table, his profile sharp and familiar. The strong jaw I once traced with my fingers was set like stone. He stared straight ahead at the judge's bench, refusing the slightest acknowledgement of my existence. This was the final, brutal stage of his strategy, not to fight me, but to erase me, to make our shared history a one-man show. The proposed settlement was a punchline, a lump sum that wouldn't buy a studio apartment in this city, and a pittance of alimony that would expire in 2 years. The prenup, signed when we were 25 and dizzy with love and big, vague dreams, was indeed ironclad if you viewed the last decade and a half as he presented it. A young associate from Bradstone's firm wheeled a document cart forward, stacked with pristine, tabbed binders. We have entered into evidence, Your Honor, a full accounting of Mr. Vance's assets, business growth, and the separate property status of Etha Tech stock. We also have the executed prenuptial agreement, Exhibit B. Clerk moved robotically, tagging the mountain of paper. My own contribution to the evidentiary landscape was the single, slender folder on the table before me. My lawyer, a kind-faced, overworked man named Paulson who handled mostly uncontested divorces, had barely glanced at it. He'd advised me to take the offer. It's not worth the fight, Alara. he'd said gently, mistaking my quiet for defeat. "The prenup is clear, and his resources, they'll bury us in motions until we're bankrupt." So I sat, a ghost in a courtroom. The spectators, a few law students, a bored reporter, a couple waiting for their own case, looked at me with a mixture of pity and disinterest. I was a cliché, the discarded wife, a story so old it had lost all its edges. Judge Morrison presided over it all with a weary patience. He was in his late 60s, with a lined face that suggested he'd seen every permutation of human discord. He listened to Bradstone, occasionally making a note on a legal pad, his movements slow and deliberate. He seemed immersed in the procedural drone. Bradstone was wrapping up, his voice swelling with finality. "In sum, Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. The parties entered into a contract. One party flourished. The other enjoyed the benefits of that flourishing. The contract provides for this exact contingency. We ask the court to affirm the agreement and dissolve the marriage, allowing Mr. Vance to move forward and continue his valuable work." He sat down, the legs of his chair scraping the floor with a sound of finality. David gave a slight, satisfied nod. Judge Morrison sighed softly, a man ticking off another item on a long list. He lifted the first page of the petitioner's information sheet, the basic form I'd filled out with Paulson's help. Name, Alara Vance. Maiden name, Rhodes. Former city of residence, Boston. He started to set it down, his eyes already glazing over. Then he stopped. His head tilted a fraction of an inch. He lifted the sheet closer to his face, his brow furrowing slightly behind his glasses. He adjusted the heavy, black frames, pushing them higher on the bridge of his nose. It was a small, ordinary gesture, but something about the intensity of his focus made the air in the room grow still. The reporter stopped tapping on his phone. One of the law students leaned forward. The judge's eyes flicked from the paper to me. Not a glance, but a stare. A penetrating, reassessing look that traveled from my downturned head over my simple navy dress and back to my face. I met his gaze then. I couldn't help it. In his eyes, the weariness was gone, replaced by a spark of sharp, incredulous recognition. He cleared his throat, the sound like a crack in the quiet. "One moment, counsel." Bradstone, who had been whispering something to David, looked up mid-sentence. "Your Honor." Judge Morrison ignored him, his eyes locked on me. "Ms. Vance," he said, and his voice was different now. It was no longer the automatic, procedural tone. It was pointed, alive with inquiry. "Alara Vance, formerly of Boston, previously known as," he paused, as if to ensure he got the name exactly right. "Alara Rhodes." Every atom of attention in the room crystallized on me. David's head snapped toward the bench, confusion etching his features. Bradstone's confident smirk faded into wary blankness. I unfolded my hands, placing them flat on the cold table. I could feel the weight of the silence, heavy and expectant. I took a breath that felt like my first real one all day. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. It carried in the stunned hush. A profound, palpable shift moved through the chamber. Judge Morrison leaned back in his high leather chair, a slow, measured movement. He looked from me to Bradstone, and his expression was no longer that of a bored administrator. It was the look of a man who had just found a live wire in a bundle of dead cables. "The court," he announced, his voice firm and leaving no room for argument, "will take a brief recess." "Counsel," he said, pointing a finger at Bradstone, then at my poor, gaping Mr. Paulson in my chambers. "Now, and," he added, his gaze settling on me with an unsettling respect, "bring your client, Ms. Vance." The gavel cracked, a sharp, decisive sound. Chaos erupted in a whisper. The spectators buzzed. The reporter started typing furiously. Bradstone was up, quickly gathering files, his brow furrowed in utter confusion. David rose too, his composure shattered. He took 2 quick steps toward me as I stood, my legs steady beneath me. He grabbed my arm, his fingers tight. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice low and frantic, his breath warm and familiar against my ear. It was the first time he'd touched me or spoken directly to me in months. I turned my head and met his eyes. I saw the panic there, the dawning fear that his calculus, so perfect, so ruthless, had missed a vital variable. In that moment, the ghost he had tried to create solidified. A faint, cold smile touched my lips when he hadn't seen in years. "I showed up, David," I said softly, and pulled my arm from his grasp. I turned and walked toward the oak-paneled door behind the bench, following the bailiff. The eyes of the room burned into my back, no longer dismissive, but blazing with raw, undiluted curiosity. The door to the judge's chambers swung open, a dark rectangle promising a different kind of trial altogether. I crossed the threshold without looking back. The judge's chambers were a sanctuary of quiet, thick carpet, and the scent of old paper and lemon oil. Law books in rich, burgundy leather lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Judge Morrison motioned us to a small seating area, a worn leather sofa and 2 armchairs arranged around a low table strewn with legal journals. It was disorientingly intimate after the formal theater of the courtroom. "Sit, please," he said, his voice now stripped of its judicial boom. He removed his robe, hanging it on a stand by the door, revealing suspenders over a slightly rumpled white shirt. He looked older, more human, but his eyes held an unnerving intensity. My lawyer, Paulson, shuffled in last, looking like a man who had accidentally wandered onto a stage. Bradstone recovered first, his professional veneer snapping back into place, though a fissure of uncertainty ran through it. "Your Honor, if this is about some procedural issue with the petitioner's forms, I can assure you." "It's not about the forms, counsel," Judge Morrison interrupted, not unkindly, but with a finality that silenced the room. He settled into the chair opposite me, steepling his fingers. He looked at me, really looked, as if seeing me for the first time. "Elara Rhodes. I was a junior associate, 3rd year out of law school at Fairhaven and Strauss in Boston, 20 years ago this fall." The name of the firm landed in the quiet room with the weight of an anvil. Bradstone's head tilted. I saw the cogs turning, the frantic search through the archives of legal memory. Fairhaven and Strauss was white shoe, old money powerful. "The Rhodes case," Judge Morrison continued, the words reverent. "Corporate espionage, defamation, securities fraud, the Bancroft Group unraveling in real time on the front page of the Wall Street Journal every day for 6 weeks. His gaze never left mine. "You were the whistleblower, and you were their forensic accountant. You built the case from the inside out. I sat in that gallery for 2 days just to watch you testify. The cross-examination by Arthur Lowell." He let out a soft whistle, a flash of the young lawyer he'd been breaking through. "He tried to break you. He couldn't even bend you." A memory, sharp and visceral, cut through the numbness that had encased me for months. Not the memory of the testimony itself, but the moment before. The feel of the wooden rail of the witness stand under my palms, cool and solid. The way the courtroom lights had felt like interrogation lamps. The face of Lowell, a grizzled legal pit bull, sneering at her from the defense table. The calm that had descended on me then, a strange, crystalline clarity where the spreadsheets and money trails ceased to be numbers and became a story, a map of greed. My voice, steady, explaining to the jury. "If you follow the ghost asset here, to this shell company in the Caymans, and then trace the disbursement back through this series of consulting fees, you'll see it lands here, in this executive's personal account, 2 weeks before the fraudulent earnings report was published." I blinked, pulling myself back to the present. The judge was waiting. "That was a long time ago, Your Honor," I said, my voice low. "It was," he agreed. "And then you vanished. The trial ended, convictions were handed down, and Elara Rhodes disappeared from the scene. The legal world wondered. Some thought you'd been paid off. Others thought the stress had retired you." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I never imagined I'd find you in my courtroom being portrayed as a social coordinator." The phrase, which had earlier felt like a lash, now sounded absurd, almost comical. Bradstone flushed. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my client's wife's youthful career has no bearing on the prenuptial agreement or the dissolution of this marriage." "Doesn't it?" Judge Morrison's eyebrow arched. He turned back to me. "Ms. Rhodes, may I call you that? It seems to fit better at the moment. What happened?" The directness of the question, the genuine confusion in his eyes, undid something inside me. It was David's derision or Bradstone's contempt. It was the simple, profound bewilderment of a professional seeing a master craftsman's tools left to rust in a ditch. I took a breath. I met David right after. The trial was everything, all-consuming. I was exhausted. And he was. I searched for the old truth, the one that had been polished into a lie. He was sunlight. He was an idea for a new kind of data firewall and big dreams, and he promised me a quiet life. He said I'd done my part, saved the world from one set of bad guys. He said, "Let me build something for us. You rest, you just be with me." The words, spoken aloud, sounded so naive. A trap gilded with affection. "And you agreed. It wasn't a question." I agreed to a pause, not an erasure. My eyes flicked to Bradstone, then back to the judge. I helped him structure his first LLC. I reviewed the early investor contracts. I found the flaw in the beta version of his flagship software that his own engineers missed, a backdoor that would have rendered it useless. I used the same ghost asset tracing methods. I saw David in our tiny apartment kissing me with desperate gratitude. "You're my secret weapon, Lara. My brilliant, beautiful secret." Judge Morrison's face darkened with a slow-burning anger. "And the prenuptial agreement, when was that signed?" 6 months before the wedding. He said it was just a formality his new investors required, that it protected us, that it was just paper. I could still feel the pen in my hand, the excitement of our future drowning out the quiet, analytical voice in my head that usually checked the boxes, ran the scenarios. The judge looked at Bradstone now, and his voice was icy. A prenup presented to a world-class forensic accountant, a woman specializing in uncovering hidden value and coercive financial structures, while she was in a state of post-traumatic exhaustion and emotionally invested in a new relationship. He let the statement hang. "Counselor, you and I both know unconscionability can have many faces. One of them is the deliberate concealment of relevant context to secure a signature." Bradstone was sputtering now. "Your Honor, there is no evidence of concealment. Mr. Vance's success is his own." "Is it?" Judge Morrison shot back. "She just named 3 material contributions to the foundational value of Etha Tech. Did your financial disclosures account for the value of those contributions? The intellectual property of that early contract review? The business-saving flaw detection?" He stood up, packing a short path behind his chair. "We are no longer discussing a simple contract affirmation. We are discussing the potential for a profound inequity, built on a fundamental misrepresentation of the petitioner's capacity and contribution." He stopped and looked at me, his decision made. "We will reconvene in 30 minutes. Ms. Rhodes, you will sit with Mr. Paulson. You will explain to him, in precise detail, every instance of your direct material contribution to the foundation and growth of Etha Tech. Dates, projects, outcomes. You will then provide a list of documents, emails, or other records that may substantiate this. Mr. Bradstone," he said, turning to the now pale lawyer, "you will inform your client that the scope of this hearing has changed dramatically. We are now entering a phase of discovery that will examine the validity of the prenuptial agreement and the true nature of the marital partnership. The court is considering the appointment of a forensic auditor, and I am strongly inclined to grant one." He walked to the door and opened it. The murmur from the courtroom spilled in. "We will reconvene at 2:15 p.m. And counselor," he added, his hand on the knob, "in my courtroom you will address the petitioner as Ms. Rhodes Vance. The record should reflect who she is." The walk back into the open courtroom was a reverse of the earlier journey. The eyes that had slid over me now clung, wide and speculative. The law students were practically vibrating. The reporter was typing a torrent. David stood as we approached our tables. His face was ashen, his confidence replaced by a stunned, cornered anxiety. He looked at me not with hatred, but with a kind of terrified recognition, as if I were a ghost he'd thought he'd buried, now standing solid and demanding in the sunlight. I didn't look at him. I took my seat, the same cold chair, but I did not slump into it. I sat upright. I opened my simple folder. Inside was not much, but it was a start. A faded photocopy of a Boston Legal Journal article mentioning my testimony, an old business card that read Lara Rhodes, forensic accountant, and a single cryptic spreadsheet. A personal ledger I'd kept in the first 2 years of Etha Tech, noting hours spent on contract analysis, Series A, software architecture review, Investor due diligence. Paulson leaned over, his voice a hushed, awed whisper. Ilara, Ms. Rhodes-Vance, why didn't you tell me any of this? I turned the spreadsheet toward him, my finger pointing to a specific dated entry. Because I'd forgotten what it meant, I said quietly, the analytical coldness seeping back into my veins, a familiar and powerful tonic. But I'm starting to remember now. Let's begin with this. The gavel cracked, a sound that now felt less like an ending and more like a starter's pistol. Judge Morrison surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on David and Bradstone with a new, flinty assessment before settling on me with a nod so slight it was almost imperceptible. It was the nod of one professional to another. Counsel, the judge began, his voice resonating in the newly charged silence. The court, having recessed to consider preliminary information, is now proceeding under an amended scope. The validity and enforceability of the prenuptial agreement, specifically regarding potential unconscionability and the full disclosure of assets, including intellectual and professional contributions, is now a central matter. Mr. Paulson, you may proceed. My lawyer, transformed from a hesitant advisor into a man with a tangible thread to pull, stood. He cleared his throat, the sound too loud in the quiet. Thank you, Your Honor. Given the court's direction, and upon initial consultation with my client, we move for an immediate forensic audit of all marital assets, with particular focus on the capitalization, early valuation, and intellectual property development of Etha Tech during its first 5 years of operation. We further move to suspend the enforceability of the prenuptial agreement pending the outcome of this audit and a full discovery process. Bradstone was on his feet before Paulson finished. Objection, Your Honor. This is a fishing expedition of the highest order, predicated on unsubstantiated last-minute claims designed to... Mr. Bradstone, Judge Morrison interrupted, his tone dangerously calm. Sit down, your objection is noted and overruled. The claims, as you call them, come from a source whose professional credibility in matters of financial forensics is, I can attest, considerable. The motion for a forensic audit is granted. The court will appoint a neutral expert, with costs to be borne initially by the marital estate. He turned his attention back to Paulson. Counsel, does your client have specific areas of inquiry for the auditor? Paulson looked at me. I gave him a single, firm nod. He turned back, reading from the notepad we had hastily scribbled on during the recess. Yes, Your Honor. We request the audit trace the development of the proprietary algorithm for the Etha Core Shield, version 1, reviewing all notes, emails, and draft code from its inception. We request a review of all contracts with the initial venture capital firm, Graythorn Partners, from 2010. And we request a full accounting of the business decisions made following the discovery of a critical security flaw in the beta software in Q4 of 2009, and the financial impact of remedying said flaw. Each item was a bullet, and I watched them strike David. He flinched at the mention of the beta flaw. His hand, resting on the table, curled into a white-knuckled fist. He was staring at the polished wood grain as if it could swallow him. Bradstone tried again, a rearguard action. Your Honor, this is a staggering overreach into proprietary business information. The burden on my client is a burden your client should have considered, the judge stated flatly. When he allegedly presented himself as the sole architect of his fortune while standing beside a forensic architect. The audit parameters are approved. We will now address interim support. What followed was a dismantling. Bradstone argued for the minimal, pre-agreed amount. Paulson, with my quiet prompts, presented a new calculation based on the standard of living actually maintained, and my potential earning capacity had my career not been sidelined. A figure benchmarked against senior forensic accounting consultants. Judge Morrison didn't even wait for Bradstone to finish his rebuttal. Interim spousal support is set at $25,000 per month, retroactive to the filing date. Housing and reasonable legal fees to be provisioned from the marital estate pending final resolution. It was more than 5 times what David had offered, a number that acknowledged I was not a hobbyist, but a professional who had been forcibly retired. The formal proceedings wound down, a series of mechanical orders and dates set for the auditor's preliminary report. But the true climax came just before adjournment. "Ms. Rhodes Vance," Judge Morrison said, "before we conclude, the court would like to hear from you directly. Is there anything you wish to state on the record?" I stood. The room seemed to hold its breath. I could feel David's panicked stare, Bradstone's resentful glare, the spectators' rapt attention. I looked not at them, but at the judge. "Your Honor," I began, my voice finding its old, steady courtroom cadence, the one that explained complex truths to juries. "For 15 years, I lived in a story written by someone else. In that story, I was the supportive backdrop, the grateful audience. My past was treated as a closed book, my skills as charming relics. I was not a partner, I was a perk." I paused, letting the words settle. I didn't break our vows, I was erased by them. The man who asked me to set down my tools later used my absence as proof I never carried any. Today isn't about punishment. It's about recalibration. About the court seeing a balance sheet that includes the invisible ink. I seek only to reclaim the value of my own mind and the right to write my own story from here forward. I sat down. The silence was absolute, profound. Judge Morrison's eyes were soft with something that looked like respect and perhaps a trace of sorrow. "The record," he said quietly, "will reflect the petitioner's statement, and the court advises Mr. Vance that in any further proceedings, he would be well served to remember exactly who he is dealing with. Court is adjourned." The final gavel fell. The following weeks were a whirlwind of a different sort. The sleek, intimidating offices of the court-appointed auditor, a woman named Dr. Chandra Mehta with a razor-sharp mind and no patience for corporate obfuscation, became a familiar space. I sat across from her, not as a nervous spouse, but as a consulting professional. We spoke the same language of data trails, timestamps, version histories. David's legal team fought every document request, but Judge Morrison's orders were broad and stern, and Chandra was a bloodhound. Emails David thought were deleted were recovered from old servers. Early code repositories showed comments tagged with my initials. ER. Questions about security protocols that predated the official discovery of the beta flaw by his engineering team. The initial Graythorn contracts had tracked changes. My personal email was listed as receiving the drafts, and the final versions incorporated specific, risk-mitigating language that mirrored my notes from the Rhodes case. David's settlement offers began to change. They climbed steeply, desperately. The pittance became a 7-figure sum, then an 8-figure one, coupled with stock options. My new lawyer, a fierce litigator from a top family law firm who had called me after reading about the hearing, simply filed them away. "We're not negotiating from his fantasy anymore," she said. "We're establishing facts." The most powerful moment wasn't in a courtroom or an office. It was a phone call. David, his voice stripped of all its former arrogance, strained and thin. Lara, please, this audit, it's tearing the company apart. The board is asking questions. The press is sniffing around. You've made your point. Name your price. Just make it stop." I looked out the window of my new, temporary apartment, a bright, clean space I'd rented myself. "I already have David," I said, my voice calm. "My price is the truth. The auditor will finish her work. The court will rule. You don't get to negotiate with the truth. You just have to finally live with it." I hung up. There was no satisfaction in it, only a deep, quiet certainty. Now, sunlight streams into a different office. My office. A modern, airy workspace in a collaborative firm that handles complex financial litigation. A large monitor glows before me. On the screen is a dense spreadsheet, and in a video conference window is the anxious face of a general counsel from a mid-sized tech company. And the discrepancy appears here in the R&D tax credit allocation, I say, my cursor highlighting a cell. It's being double counted against the subsidiary's assets. It's not fraud yet, but it's a significant compliance risk that will unravel during due diligence. You'll need to trace it back through this internal transfer portal. The man on the screen blinks, relief and awe on his face. "How did you? We've had our own people looking at this for weeks." I offer a small, professional smile. "It's what I do, John. I follow the ghosts in the machine." I close the spreadsheet. "I'll send you a full report with the remediation path by end of day." I end the call and lean back in my chair. On the credenza behind me, next to a thriving fiddle leaf fig, sits two framed items. One is the final settlement agreement from the divorce, a document that reflects a fair, substantial division of assets, acknowledging a true partnership, and a non-disclosure agreement that I insisted apply to both parties. David had signed it without looking me in the eye. The other is a simple, elegant plaque. Alara Rhodes, Senior Financial Forensics Consultant. The quiet in the office is not the silence of erasure. It is the quiet of focus, of a mind at work, valued and visible. The ghost has not just been seen, she has been remade in her own image. The greatest victory was never in the ruling or the settlement. It was in the moment I sat down in this chair, opened this laptop, and remembered with every fiber of my being who I was. The story they tried to write for me is over. Mine is just beginning.